Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City Council City of Brisbane workshop of January 17th, 2017. Tonight we have a special meeting regarding One Planet Living, and we'll start off with the roll call, please.
Please note for the record that all council members are present except for Council Member Conway and Council Member O'Connell.
Thank you. So item A, receive a presentation regarding the One Planet Living initiative from Paran Desai, co-founder of Bioregional Development Group. So I'll take this opportunity to briefly introduce Paran. He is joining us tonight all the way from across the ocean in England. So we're lucky to have him with us here tonight. He is the co-founder of Bioregional and international director of One Planet Communities. And as you know, we have our sustainability framework, which his organization, I believe we collaborated with him, and we're modeling our framework after the work that he's done. He's worked on bioregional projects and enterprises in sustainable forestry, recycling, and real estate development. And in 1997, he initiated the BedZed project, which in turn led him to initiate the Z Squared, a zero carbon, zero waste project, and the One Planet Living concepts, which he will be going over with us today. And he has since worked to implement these concepts in projects around the world. Paran has also worked on policy, chairing the UK Department of the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Advisory Group. He was voted in the UK's top 5 most influential people in construction for the decade in 2010, and he received a 2009 Skoll Award for Social Entrepreneurship and a World Economic Forum 2011 Schwab Award as European Social Entrepreneur of the Year. So, without further ado, Paran Desai.
This is on now, is it? It says low battery on here, unfortunately, so we'll see how it goes. But Laurie, thank you very much for inviting me here, and thank you, all of you, for coming this evening. And it's great to be here. What we'd like to do this evening is I'd like to just spend about 20 minutes giving you a bit of background of where One Planet Living has come from, a bit about some of the projects around the world which are using the One Planet principles, and then an opportunity for all of us to think about Brisbane's future and in what ways might the One Planet principles actually help create that vision. So I'd like to, is that going up? Yeah, so what's our vision for One Planet Living? It's how can we create places and products and services which can make it easy, attractive, and affordable for people to lead happy and healthy lives within the environmental limits of our one planet. And this is actually where I live. This is the BedZed, Beddington Zero Fossil Energy Development in South London. It actually started as a project because we were growing as an organisation. Bioregional was founded in 1994, and by the late 1990s, we'd outgrown our office space. We went to our municipality and asked them whether they had some land we could build some green offices. They said no, but we're selling land for residential development, so why don't you build a mixed-use development with residential land? We'll give you planning permission or entitlement for offices as well. So our office became an eco-village. And this is a picture of it, completed in 2002. And so it's 100 homes and about 20,000 square feet of commercial space and community space. And my wife and I moved in here, so as well as moving our offices in, we also live within this development in 15 years now. So it's been a really interesting experience professionally and personally. We didn't just look at green buildings, so the design, of course, was looked at energy efficiency, renewable energy generation, but we also looked at creating a whole sustainable lifestyle. and a high-quality lifestyle. So everything from introducing the first car-sharing scheme into England, and now there's several thousand cars in car-sharing schemes around London. We reduced car parking spaces, created car-free areas so kids can play, neighbours can meet each other, so really walkable, cyclable community, and started introducing electric vehicle charging points, which were unusual 15 years ago. And we also formed links with local farmers as well, and looked at direct deliveries of local food, and in fact since have also started our own community-supported agriculture scheme. But one of the most interesting things, although it was driven from an environmental perspective originally, the most interesting statistic I find with it is actually, we've got the environmental statistics, 50% less energy, less electricity than a standard development, 80% less heating than a standard development, 65% less private car use, but 50% less water. But the real statistic that attracts me to BedZ is that the average person in our development knows 19 of their neighbours by name, which is 4 times the UK average. So it's really created a neighbourly place, and that has makes it a really great place to live. So it is like a village, even though it's in a suburb of London. And in fact, one of our trustees is a consultant physician, and my own background's on the health side as well. So we asked our trustee, what sort of health benefits might we be getting from such a development? So the first thing he said was, well, if you've created car-free areas, the centre of development's car-free, you'll actually have better air quality there, and if kids are playing in that space, it will be good for you'll tackle some of the issues we have with respiratory ill health, particularly in children. Second thing is, you said, if people are walking and cycling more and using their cars less, tackle the epidemic we have of obesity and diabetes, or help tackle that. But he said, actually, what I think long term, when we look over a 20, 30-year horizon, we're going to see better mental health outcomes for people living within these communities. Because if you know more of your neighbours, you're less likely to become isolated, and isolation is a key predisposing factor to being tipped into clinical depression or anxiety states. So really, we started to see sustainability as a route in to actually creating better places for people to live, work, and play, and to actually improve mental or physical health outcomes into the long term. But as we finished off building BedZ, also we started to use some of the metrics that were emerging, including ones which were developed, or co-developed from an Oakland-based company called Global Footprint Network, called Ecological Footprinting. And the idea behind this is that we can get a very good idea. Well, we know how much productive land and sea there is on the planet, and we know that there are about 12.6 billion hectares of productive land and sea. I'm not sure this works, but is this a... Yeah, it should. Oh yeah. So we got about 12.6, so a line up here of productive land and sea. And if we leave 10% for wildlife, we have a budget of about 11.2 billion hectares from which to meet our needs. And all our consumption, be it for food, for energy, for materials, can be converted into area of productive land and sea on the planet from which to meet those needs. And if we look at the world's demands on the planet, we see it growing from the 1960s onwards. Round about somewhere in the 1980s or so, we probably exceeded the carrying capacity of the planet. And in fact, now we're consuming about 50% more each year than the planet can sustain into the long term. So we're seeing the effects of that, for example, with fisheries depleted around the world, and things like climate change, because the planet can't absorb carbon dioxide as fast as we're releasing it into the atmosphere. And And we can also get a concept of our ecological budget. So if we take the 11.2 billion hectares, we got somewhere over 7 billion people on the planet now. We have about 1.6 hectares, so about 2.5 acres of productive land and sea per person from which to meet our needs. Or another way of putting it is if we are living sustainably, on average, a person would have an ecological footprint of about 1.6 hectares. If we have that as our global target, 1.6 hectares per person, you can see different countries are putting different demands on the planet. So, for example, in Mozambique, the average person in Mozambique requires about 0.6 hectares to meet their needs. In most of Europe is somewhere between 5 or 6 hectares, and the average person in the US requires about approaching 10 hectares of productive land and sea to support current patterns of consumption. We started creating this way of communicating that fact with people. So if everyone on Earth had European patterns of consumption, we'd need about 3 planets worth of resources to support us. If we all live like North Americans, we'd need about 5 planets. So the challenge is, how can we create places where people can lead happy and healthy lives, but within the environmental limits of one planet? And we've been working for the last 15 years with partners around the world to show how that can be possible. So it sounds a big challenge, but say half of that ecological footprint is carbon dioxide emissions. And for example, if we go to completely renewable energy, we can halve the environmental footprint of our patterns of consumption. So when you start looking at different components of our lifestyle, we can see that they're good solutions for every part of our lifestyles, where we can actually have high quality ways of life, or even higher quality ways of life than we have at the moment, but do it in a way which is not depleting the resources of the planet. So we developed also 10 One Planet principles, which we use to help create what we call One Planet action plans, or we co-create with residents or with companies or with cities. Their citizens have an opportunity to contribute to a collective plan for how to create a high quality and sustainable future. And I might just pass around, got a few, my business cards have the 10 principles on the back, and thanks, Jan, if you pass that around there, I'll just pass around here. There are 10 very simple, intuitive principles which we use as DNA for sustainability. So we use these principles not just to help cities, but also companies, small and big companies, and real estate developers and neighborhoods to write their own One Planet action plans. And the principles go from health and happiness, equity and local economy, culture and community, land use and wildlife, sustainable water, local and sustainable food, sustainable materials, sustainable transport, zero waste and zero carbon energy. And we find now that we can tell people about the One Planet story in 2 or 3 minutes. We talk about how many planets it might take to support a lifestyle. We spend another 5 or 10 minutes just talking through these principles. They're very intuitive. So even within 15 minutes, we're finding high school kids can start contributing to writing a One Planet action plan. So we find it a very easy way for everyone to start communicating, and it can go all the way from a high school kid up to professional engineers and architects engaging in looking at, for example, developing real estate projects, to social scientists, to economists as well. So it forms a nice framework for people to co-create solutions with. And over the last 15 years, we've been working on projects all around the world, and I'll just share a few of those with you. So we went on, for example, we went on to raise some finance to build another project. This is 170 apartments in Brighton on the south coast of England, where we actually went a bit further than the BedZ project, and we actually went completely private car free, so it's still the largest private car free development in the UK. But at the same time, it also sold very well, had a lot of community facilities in it. We included things like rooftop food growing areas, which was the single most popular feature of the development, space for farmers to drop local food deliveries into a foyer, so even if you're in an apartment, you can get a local food delivery easily. So thinking about that lifestyle. And in fact, every single person who worked on the project, so this is why we call it DNA for sustainability, we used it all the way through construction, design, construction, and into the long-term property management. So even when we had a canteen on site, it went out with a One Planet specification. So the workers could still get their full English breakfast, but it was with local organic sausages, with free-range eggs, with grilled rather than fried vegetables. There was always a vegetarian option, and it proved incredibly popular. And I know the story I really like about this is, I was on site, and there was one of the 16-year-old apprentices, Ashley, who we always used to have a chat when I was on the construction site. And one day he came up to me and he said, "Do you know, Purin, I've started eating vegetables. I hadn't eaten any vegetables apart from chips since I was 5 years old." So this French fries. So this 16-year-old, hadn't for 11, 12 years eaten any vegetables. And he said, "But now Wendy runs a canteen. She's got me eating salads, got me eating fruit." And it was just wonderful to think that the last place you might expect a construction site to help transform, diet and behaviour, but you can even do it through that. And so, fantastic to see that happen. It was very popular in the marketplace as well. So it sold very well. And this is another one of the residents we interviewed. So Silvana and her husband moved in, and they said, "We moved into One Brighton, sold their cars to have this was a particular place they could easily have a car-free life, and adopted a healthier lifestyle. And in 18 months, they lost 35 kilos, or about 80 pounds, between them, by adopting, getting out on their bicycles, walking, eating a healthier diet." So, the way we design our communities into the future, whether existing communities or new communities, we really will affect the health outcomes of the next generation, and something which is, of course, very important, and massive economic impacts of that, particularly as we have a more aging population. We need to keep people active and healthy for longer. This is another one of our new developments, though this is this is near Oxford, the first of 6,000 homes which are being built as a new eco-town, as it's called. So that's run completely off renewable energy, car sharing schemes, even though it's in a more rural area. This is one which was completed in Seattle, again run completely off renewable energy, now the next phases of this development are being built. The developers of that community were also stunned by the response, how popular it was amongst people, and that people started from the neighbouring area started looking at moving into this new development. And then here in California, been working for 10 years helping the city and a developer there look at Somo Village, Sonoma Mountain Village, where it's the old Hewlett-Packard data center in Roanoke Park, which has now been converted into a green industrial park with about 1,000 people working there now, about 3 megawatts of photovoltaics. So it's been a great job generator in the area, and sometime next year, residential will start getting built around the industrial park. And this is the redevelopment of a former paper mill site, an industrial area in the centre of Ottawa. So up in the corner there, these are actually the Parliament buildings of Canada. So it's the national Parliament, and then just within half a mile or so, this whole area is being developed as a One Planet community with a mix of residential, industrial, retail, and community facilities. And this is opening up in this summer. Again, we've been working on this for 10 years. So this is the extension to Disneyland Paris. It's being done as a One Planet community. It's a resort development, but run completely on renewable energy, 1,000 holiday apartments, with a large geothermal swimming lagoon, so the largest artificial lagoon, using all the 10 principles, so looking at more local food, zero waste management strategies. We're finding the principles have been working on a range of different projects, and this is the project from about a year ago under construction and well advanced since that picture was taken. But we've also worked with large companies like our Home Depot equivalent. So they've adopted the One Planet principles. They look at products which can help people lead a One Planet lifestyle. They use it in their operations as well. And to small companies. So this is our local coffee van, and we've started a One Planet makeover. The coffee van starting with putting thin film solar panels on his van, and he's now starting to recycle his coffee grounds to a local mushroom farm. Different things that we can do at different scales. And we've also been working with cities on city strategies. So this is with Brighton and Hove on the south coast of England, one of 3 cities in the UK which we're working with. Actually, there are more cities who have adopted the principles, but Brighton Hove is one of the ones we work very closely with. We went through a facilitated process with the community and community groups for them to contribute their ideas for how the city can actually increase quality of life, can increase in the city as well as reduce its ecological footprint. And we need to think about how in the UK we've got this 3 planet lifestyle. We can start introducing green buildings. We can start creating more sustainable ways of living within One Planet communities. But it's only when we start including citywide infrastructure that we get the sort of step change in reduction in ecological footprint and increase in sustainability that we need to live happily on our One Planet. And I was here in October last and was able to share a bit. We're now building a platform, online platform. And that will launch on May the 1st, but it will be an opportunity then for anyone to start contributing to plans online, sharing and comparing them, and we'll introduce the first set of tools, action planning and monitoring tools in May, and add other tools over the following 6 months to that platform. So it really is about creating quality of life for me now. It's not just about reducing environmental impact. And this is here a couple of my neighbours, Tom and Yanetta, moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment when Yanetta was pregnant with her first child. And then as their family has grown, they just waited till a larger home was available, a large 3-bedroom home was available within the development, and moved into that. And so we've had about 6 couples move within the development in the period just because they like living there so much. So we're very pleased about that, and that neighbourliness is a very important aspect of it, particularly maybe as we move into more uncertain times, that people feel of great peace of mind if they know their neighbours, they can rely on them, they can help each other. It's been a good experience. I'm not saying everyone gets on well together all the time. Of course, we have our differences as neighbours, but that's all part of the richness of life. But the police love it as well, because we're not in a very good area of South London, but we actually have less graffiti, less crime, because there's a natural neighborhood watch. Lots of benefits from that perspective as well. That's what I'd like to share with you in terms of our experience and experience from around the world, and very happy to take some questions about that. But after that, I've got some questions I'd like to ask you, and to bring out some ideas from you about what the future might be here in Brisbane. But thank you for that.
Thank you, Goran. Great. So thanks for that informative.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'll open it up to questions from the council, and then we'll also ask for questions from the public. But first, I'll open it up to my colleagues. If you have any questions.
No? All right. No questions. Thank you, Faran, for coming back to Brisbane, and I want to just thank you for devoting your life, to try and make the world a better place. You're a pretty smart guy. You're working in a lot of places, making lots of money, doing things, and you devoted yourself to this endeavor. And I just want to say thank you very, very much. When we were putting together the sustainability framework, when we had our committee, we weren't sure which direction we were going to go. But there wasn't a lot of choices out there either. But there was one that really stood out and showed us that, okay, here's this framework that we could, I think, very easily apply our own values to. And I'm just really proud of the way that our community has come together to contribute to that document. And I know you're going to talk a little bit about it later on, but every advisory group to the council has reviewed it and contributed, and not a single group, and I haven't heard any member of the public say, that document that we've created, that's a bunch of rubbish.
Yeah.
No, they've all been very positive, and when the Planning Commission gave their recommendation to the council, part of their recommendation was to incorporate the framework into the general plan. And so I want to just get a little bit more information about the One Planet City, because you incorporate it into the general plan. Yes, it's for the Baylands, but we've also been talking about incorporating the One Planet principles into everything that we do. And so, I'd like for you to talk about how important that is to incorporate the city's energy and responsibility, so that then you can get to that One Planet lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, Cliff, thank you very much for your for your kind words, and we've had a lot of fun over the years as well, working with different groups on their sustainability strategies. And I think we are living in a world where change is coming very rapidly. It's difficult for all of us to cope. But how can we help communities to harness those changes for good? Because some of those very disruptive changes are coming, but some of those good, some of those bad. But if we can harness the good ones and mitigate the effects of the less good ones, I think we could be in a very good place over the next 20 years. And really, what we've done with One Planet Live, we work very hard to make it as intuitive as possible and keep it as simple as possible, so you can. Everyone can contribute. Literally, everyone can contribute to that. See how they can contribute to a plan which works for everyone. I mean, not everyone's going to get everything that they want, but you can get enough from it. And of course, if we build social and environmental capital, actually, that's what our future prosperity will depend on, as much as building, the economic base of an area. And I think people are realizing that much more clearly and seeing that value. So they are simple principles which they're free for anyone to use, and we just want people who are finding them useful to use them. That's all. That's really what we want to see happen. I'd like to spend a little bit of time this evening just starting a bit of a conversation around the ways in which the principles might be useful in the city, as you say, not just for new development, for existing, for Brisbane City as a whole, and Brisbane City's future as a whole. So, I think rather than me talking too much about that, it will be good to maybe get you to say a few things collectively about where you're going, what the trends are going to be, and in what ways the principles might be able to help.
Yes, yeah. I'm going to hold off then on my questions. I don't want to just be here and talk the whole time. I think it's good to get some feedback from folks in the audience, and then you're right. Start that conversation.
Yeah. So I'm happy to take a couple more questions about the presentation, but otherwise we can go on into a sort of structured discussion to bring out some of the ideas and possibilities.
Are there any questions from the public at this point? If you have a question, raise your hand, and maybe the clerk can hand you a microphone. Michael? Just wait till the mic so we get on that.
I admire what One World is doing. And it seems that all of your developments contain a residential component. And it seems that creating quality of life for people who live there is not just physical but also mental. You made that quite plain. And it seems that even in some of your more recent developments, people are living without private vehicles now. And so in Brisbane, the Baylands development, where we have service from 2 commuter rail lines, and it's on a major arterial route for 2 different counties' bus services, and it looks like there may be an extension of Geneva Avenue that would have bus rapid transit on it. How could the Baylands be One Planet Living type development without residential housing? It seems like the Baylands project is made for residential housing. You've, in Sonoma County, I guess, remediated Hewlett-Packard's site. I know in Palo Alto, Hewlett-Packard had done some pretty dramatic damage to the water table. They've used some pretty foul chemicals. I was wondering if you could address how Brisbane could incorporate a residential component to its development and how that would impact its sustainability.
Yeah, I think that's. It's a very. And it's a question which you've been looking at for a while here. I would. I'd approach it from maybe another perspective, and I think hopefully the discussion can bring that out. Is what are the trends? What are the challenges and opportunities which face Brisbane City as a whole in the coming 20 years? And what does that mean for what's the sort of development that will support current residents of Brisbane, as well as new residents of Brisbane, whoever they might be. So I think it's one of the things which perhaps we can explore a bit this evening. But I'd like to do that from a sort of structured starting point and just see where we end up by the end of the evening on that. But I think that's a very pertinent question to ask.
Thank you, Mike. Yes.
Thank you. So, I'm looking at these principles, and I think for me, a lot of them, I can really understand exactly how they would play out in these developments. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit to the equity and local economy and how that really comes through in these developments. touching on the housing issue, we obviously are having some major challenges with housing in this area, and a lot of people are being forced out of the area. So affordable housing is a common discussion, and I'm wondering if that ever plays into your developments, or how site selection goes into some of these things, and just how equity and local economy really come through in your platform and in your development plans.
Yeah, so in all the projects, there's a co-creation process with the with local stakeholders, and we look at each principle and what are the challenges for the area, and how might any development or any city plan, for example, start contributing to those challenges. So in social housing or affordable housing is a very big issue in a number of different areas around the world where we're working in. We're sort of agnostic in that sense. It's up to the local community to decide what they want, along with if there's a developer involved, what the developer and the community can agree to do together. I know there's one development that we did where, in fact, we didn't include any social housing, because in fact it was in an area which was had very low incomes, a lot of social housing, and actually what you wanted to do to balance the economy was actually to bring some higher income groups into that community. So it's about creating a balanced economy, and we're very keen on supporting local businesses. For example, just taking the Village Nature project, the extension to Disneyland Paris, it's using a lot of independent retailers there. So more local businesses rather than the big chains, to create more character, but also to give opportunities for local businesses to thrive. So yeah, very looking at equality of opportunity, whatever's important for people in that local area, and incorporating it into the plan as far as is possible. So yeah, each place is different, and the response is very, very particular to that particular place, to that particular time.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. I just had one comment. I'm glad that you mentioned about the health outcomes. That's sort of something that's a result that perhaps you looked into it, but you also, it's like an unanticipated consequence that there's this more, people are losing weight, they're exercising more, they're developing a stronger sense of community and neighborliness, and so these are sort of some of the consequences, the results that are some are intangible, some you can count, but there are definitely a lot of positive aspects. So I'm interested as well, like my colleague Cliff Lanson, hearing about the One Planet City. I found it very interesting that you said that that's by going to One Planet City, that's the only true way to achieve One Planet Living's goals, because with just the developments being One Planet Living, you're still not going to get to one planet being used to satisfy the needs of the...
Yeah, that's right, and particularly things like the wider infrastructure, like transport infrastructure. Also how we link with schools. So now there's schools around the world starting to use the One Planet principles as well, including up in Sonoma County. It's so you could, if you, for example, in our own community at BedZ, you could lead a One Planet lifestyle if you only stayed on site. But as soon as you move off site, you're into a 3-planet world. So we have to spread. In order for us to live sustainably, we actually have to reach out and support transformation in the surrounding area, and the surrounding area can support our transformation as well. But it really is at the city level also, which is going to be incredibly important in the coming months and years. It's a level at which people can feel engaged and can belong, and particularly on things like climate change, we're seeing cities taking a lead where maybe federal or national governments find it more difficult. But there are certain cities which are starting to say, okay, we believe in this and we want to address these issues. And of course, it's not just about carbon emissions, but it's also other pollutants. It's also about peace of mind. A lot of young people really worried about climate change, and so being in a city which is addressing those issues, I think, will also be an inspiration to young people. And I know there was one school just in East Bay where I was just hearing yesterday from Jan's partner, who's a teacher there, saying that actually 50% of the kids are long-term depressed now because they're worried about the future. So we've got to give them hope, and they can also give us hope. And the city is a good scale at which to do that. And we can only achieve, I think, really a high-quality way of life within a one-planet footprint by having cities engage and cities being leaders in this space.
Thank you. So at this point, if there's no further questions, we'll turn it back over to Corinne to ask us some questions.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks, Laurie. So I just want to, we've got 3 sets of questions, which we'll break up into little sections. But what I'd like to do is just for you to turn to your neighbour, introduce yourself if you don't know them. So just in couples, maybe if people can sit together. And just spend 5 minutes answering these questions with the person you're speaking to. First of all, what are the key strategies, plans, and activities which are currently in place in the city, in Brisbane City, which are aimed at increasing quality of life? So just make a quick audit of some of those activities, plans, and strategies, and then just share how you think about it. And then after 5 minutes of that, we'll just come together and we'll get a few of you to share what you've come up with. So if you take 5 minutes, that would be great.
All right. You writing or am I writing?
Has everyone got a partner? Anyone looking for you can join the 3.
In terms of behavior?
Okay.
I mean, we've always been projects that's been involved in environmental. And I'm on the board of directors of Community Energy. It's our CCA, Community Choice Generation.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so we just launched last year.
It's empowered.
We looked at Sonoma Clean Power, or Clean Energy. Use those as models.
Yeah, I was just with Lori Grace who funded that original.
She worked on, I think, Marine Wave Energy. She was on Starlight, so she's yeah, and I went to that meeting last week with CFI, which is our condition.
Another minute or two.
How about another minute?
Okay, 1 minute.
Rail terminal. Oh, yeah. We had an Irish oak.
One of her friends who goes here, thinking she was going to one reaction changed her mind and said, you know, we're not going to provide you with a car. So whenever we need to go somewhere, just incorporate Uber and Lyft.
Oh, yeah, I thought she had like just seen it at one point.
In my mind, I'm like, well, what's the motivation for it? They just don't want to think about the environment.
Yeah, I should watch it.
Maybe it is economic change.
right now. Well, we're going to challenge it.
I mean, what's
Not
she gonna do?
reinsurance.
What's she gonna do? She's gonna spend,
The right guy for inspiration.
or something. I mean, who knows? Like, some people think he is unlimited, but
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people think Donald Trump is,
Yeah, and
Really?
in my opinion, if you enjoy the music, all the time, I can hear that as my designated car. And it's like, no, because I always switch. I'm like, who's driving furthest? You take the fuel efficient car. We've got the electric car, the Prius, and the minivan.
what electric car?
Oh, yeah, you're like, we just
Okay, so that's
go small, just the Prius.
Yeah, it
We
would
don't have
run,
that
it would
three
run
row,
every-
360.
Okay.
It's got good ones.
Oh, it's unlimited.
Oh, it switches over to gas.
Okay. So has everyone had enough chance to share on that? Great. Thank you. So maybe we can just list. I'll make a note that just if people can share some of the strategies, plans, activities you're undertaking in the city. Does anyone just can shout out and start with what's going on in the city?
You wanna start, Madison?
Can you hear me? Okay,
Talk
great.
about it.
So Cliff and I created a pretty long list, so I'm just going to read them out. They're pretty self-explanatory. So first of all, Brisbane really prioritizes recreation. So of course, recreation is aimed at just bringing a better quality of life to people, and obviously giving life meaning, bringing joy to people. So we definitely see that through the concerts that we have and our community events. And we are also a town that prides itself on volunteerism. So we have certain organizations that are really focused to helping people maintain their quality of life. Like we have a Helping Hands organization that works with seniors to help them age in place. We take pride in education, and we have a close relationship with our school district. We also have a very strong connection to our mountain and our other natural resources. As a council and a community, we definitely want to see increase in affordable housing. You know, if there is housing that is brought to town, we want that to be something that is affordable for people. We currently created a master pedestrian and bicycle plan, and so trails and bringing people into the outdoors and enjoying a lot of the resources that we have here are really important to us. Getting people out and about and walking around and just enjoying the place that we live in. There are many species that are located on San Bruno Mountain that you aren't going to see anywhere else in the world. So we would definitely want to encourage our residents to soak that in. We also have an open space and ecology committee to really help us meet those goals and incorporate the community into helping us be more sustainable. And then I think as a city, we're also always looking at how to address waste and alternative energy, our energy consumption and the sources of that energy. And then, of course, as we mentioned a little bit earlier, we have our sustainability framework, which directly kind of ties all of those things together. So, did I miss anything?
You got it all, Madison.
I told you it was a long
Fantastic.
list.
That's a
I
lot.
just
Yeah, that's
threw it all in there.
That's a good list. Anything else anyone wants to add to it?
Brisbane joined Peninsula.
Here's your-
Brisbane joined Peninsula Clean Energy. I also had a strong volunteer community, community gardens, good park, and community spaces, and the city is very generous with those. Good schools, neighborhood and community values. A lot of our neighbors all know each other here in town, which is one of the things that you highlighted in your
Yeah,
community. Strong community involvement in governance. The BART shuttle helps people get to and from work. The new library, the community festival, the swimming pool, again, the strong park and recreation program. And I thought one of the main contributors to our quality of life here is our open space.
Yeah. Good. Thank you very much. Anyone else like to?
I think the only other thing that we might have come up with was the city's underwriting of cultural events. The city sponsors like BDW and Live at Mission Blue, and that's cultural events that directly address quality of life.
Brilliant.
Supporting the arts.
Good. Anyone want
and
to
the
add?
1% for the art program.
And 1% for art. Yep.
Yeah, that's another cultural.
So anyone want to add to that list? Okay. Good. So maybe you can share how you feel about what you're doing. Okay. So that, in a word, that was a good gesture. in some words, what would you say?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, there's always more that we can do because we have such a long way to go being Americans and having a 5-planet footprint.
Yeah.
But we do stuff,
Wow.
and I feel really good about what we're doing. We're just taking the first steps on our journey.
Okay. So that's good. So you're feeling good with your first steps. That's good. And anyone else like to contribute? How you're feeling? How you feel about what the city is doing, or what you're doing as a city? What came
I
up?
think Ron, we've had some surveys through the years, and just asking people how they feel about the community, and it's always in the upper 90% of the time.
Really?
So Madison and I were
really.
Just,
You're a happy city.
We are a very happy city. We were asking, okay, well, what are the things that we don't like in Madison? So we don't like airplane noise.
Yeah.
So that is one that,
airplane noise
is a real bummer. But, we're working on that.
Yeah.
So hopefully, we'll see some changes. But, if we don't like something, we definitely come out and let everybody know.
So strong sense of community and
absolutely.
strong feeling of quality of life here. That's really good. And any other? Is that the general feeling here, or were some other feelings coming up? So generally very good. I mean, that's incredible. That's really, really, really good.
It is remarkable.
Yeah, brilliant. So let's just move on. So our second set of questions. Let's spend 5 minutes again just answering these questions. What are the trends which are going to most affect Brisbane in the next 20 years? So what are the things which are coming on the horizon? And what are the opportunities which those changes might bring? And what are some of the challenges you will face? So great if you can identify 2, 3, 4, or whatever under each one of those questions. So again, I'll just leave you for 5 minutes to have a go at that, and I'm going to pop out and get a quick coffee. Of course, anyone else can get a coffee out there as well. I look forward to hearing your answers on those.
Federal uncertainty.
How are you getting on? Need another minute or? Okay, I'll give you 30 seconds more.
Yeah, I know. If you want to look at it, you gotta like sign or something.
Okay, perhaps we can come together and just share what you thought were some responses to these questions. So starting off with, what are the trends which are going to affect Brisbane City in the next 20 years? Anyone like to start and just talk about some of the trends?
Of course, everybody knows the need for housing in the Bay Area, but I think really important for Brisbane is going to be finding a way to provide a variety of housing options and variety of housing densities to meet the needs of a differing population and not to just be crammed into maximum density uniformity. I mean, we certainly do need some high density housing, but Brisbane, part of what Brisbane's character is and what makes it really beautiful is that a lot of it's relatively low density, and so kids have backyards, and so that's part of the characteristic of this community. And although we need to diversify, I don't think anybody in this community wants to lose that aspect of this community. Senior housing, of course, we have so much housing that is locked up in people who cannot afford to leave, move out of their homes, even though they're basically empty nesters with these like big empty houses. So we need to find a positive way that they can move into appropriate spaces for them and free up housing for young families. So that's a big challenge. Another big challenge is transportation. Not only is the Bay Area got a particularly high carbon footprint for a city because transportation is, and it's all transportation, it's because we don't have good transportation for such a large metropolitan area. And this is particularly challenging for Brisbane because we're on the border of two systems. We're on the northern edge of the San Mateo County system, and we're just out of reach of San Francisco. So we sort of fall in no man's land here, and nobody really seems willing to meet the needs of this community transportation-wise. Brisbane also has a huge toxic legacy with a unregulated dump. This was like, doesn't have any lining on the bottom, doesn't have any controls, nobody knows what's in there. And we have a tank farm, and we have we have a metroplex of toxicity sites, and with sea level rise, that's going to be coming at us, really. And with the air currents and stuff, we also have air pollution moving around us. There are advantages to being in the heart of the city, and there are disadvantages to being in the heart of the Bay Area. And we also have to meet our energy demands. I mean, one of you said half of meeting the sustainability footprint is reducing energy demands or actually fulfilling energy demands with non-carbon renewable sources. And again, being in the heart of the Bay Area, we are at the very center of that demand. San Francisco is right there, and I looked up once how much energy they use, and it's every day, and I wish I could remember because I feel so much cooler right now. But it's a lot. It's a whole lot. And that's just San Francisco. Yeah. So that's all I came up with.
Okay, great. So some trends there, some challenges. Any opportunities did you come up with, do you think?
Well, the opportunities we came up with, I mean, we saw the same challenges, but the opportunities really centered around the Baylands, being able to address some of those concerns. It seemed right now, I believe we're sitting in a flood zone, and the industrial park that we're sitting in was part of the bay at one point, and so we have a great pump station now, so we haven't flooded for a little while, but we're still in a flood zone. So the Baylands can be built up to withstand sea level rise, and it can be designed in a way that it can produce energy, renewable energy. Those are opportunities, and housing also. So there is an opportunity there for housing, and you can live car-free, and you will live on the rail line of Caltrain and also 3rd Street Light Rail Muni, and then the Samtrans bus line and Muni bus lines. So it's a great opportunity to address the transportation and housing issues too that were already brought up.
Good. Anyone else like to contribute? Any trends or opportunities or challenges you'd like to add to that list? Anyone else? No?
We had some. We had a lot of the same. So it's just some stuff that was different. Population increase is something that the whole world is facing, not just in the Bay Area. Specifically here, we're looking at the cost of living is drastically rising. Yep. So obviously that's why affordability is becoming more and more important. Yep. Not only just global warming and sea level rise that's affecting us, but also California has been going through a drought also. So that is something that we need to consider more, and consider how we're using our water to be most efficient with it. And because of these trends and these challenges, it really is going to require some innovation. Yep. And I think that's always exciting when you are in a position where you are forced to come together to come up with really creative solutions, and that's happened over history, and a lot of things that we have today are because there were some really big challenges that generations before us faced, and the solutions that they came up with completely changed the way that the world has operated. So I think that's even though we have some challenges, we also have an opportunity to innovate together to come up with some really creative solutions. So we'll need to look at our waste and our energy usage. And something that Cliff mentioned, which I'm so glad that he thought of, was the competitiveness of alternative energy. And so with Pacific or PCE, and being able to have the choice to choose alternative energy sources, hopefully we can create an environment in which that becomes more competitive and more of the norm, and gravitating away from the standard energy sources that we have now. What we're also seeing that's really an interesting opportunity is the tiny house movement, and you see that a lot in Seattle, and so I'm interested to see maybe that expanding here in a way that, like Barbara said, we need to have a little bit more density, but how can we do that in a way that people still have their backyards and they still have that quality of life in a space that's all of their own? And I think something like the tiny house movement will be able to provide some of those solutions. Anything else?
So that's a good list there. And
Sure. So I just want to add a few as well. So I think the big elephant in the room, of course, is the housing, and it can either be a challenge or an opportunity. So we can look at it both ways. I went last week to a CCAG meeting, which was the Congestion Management District for the county, and we had a presentation that was so fascinating about the software that's being studied and looked at right now in Silicon Valley. They're doing all these studies to figure out how can we incentivize people to drive less? How can we address this congestion that's happening on our roads? Is it through vehicle miles traveled and tracking that? Is it through taxing or by charging more for parking, or could you do things also to incentivize people to
to take public transportation by having employers, like imagine if we had like companies out at the Baylands that gave their employees stipends if they carpooled or if they took public transportation or if they didn't drive at all and then they just for trips or to run errands around town they rented a bike or a zip car that we had on site. So I think that sort of thinking about how we can use the technology that's developing in the Bay Area to really influence behavior at the Baylands that will reduce congestion and traffic. Not just, of course, with development comes more people and more cars, but there are ways we can look at it to, be a model for maybe reducing the amount of congestion. So some of those things that I heard at that CCAG meeting, I thought made me think about the Baylands and how we could, do some things to address the growth. Another trend that I've been thinking about in my neighborhood at the Ridge is how people connect. It's not just through, neighbors knowing one another by walking their dogs and seeing each other out on the street, but we actually at the Ridge have formed a WhatsApp group. And so now whenever somebody sees something that looks a little off or they're worried about, a delivery person that might look suspicious or somebody left their front door open, they'll actually post it to the group and we all get a text and, someone can say, oh, that was my son Joey, he was just playing ball. And so it's just this whole different way of communicating. And so I think we'll see that happening in our city as well, using social media to get to the next level of forming community. So those are a couple things I've been thinking about.
Nice. Brilliant. Any last ones to add to the list? I think that's a good list of trends, opportunities, and challenges.
I'll just say one.
Yep.
I just see a lot of creative cultural innovation in how people are creating support systems for themselves. And it just, as the environment gets less and less friendly to individuals who are isolated, I think we're going to see a tremendous amount of creativity in terms of, I'm from Sonoma County, so we have some of that happening there, the innovation there. But I just think that the notion of family and what I call commons, people are creating commons out of necessity. They're creating support systems for themselves. They're finding incredibly creative. When I look at some of these meeting apps, just the kinds of subjects that get people together, and then they find it's just amazing what's happening there. So I think that's a trend that's gonna keep happening and keep being surprising.
Fantastic. Okay, so maybe the last 10 minutes, maybe we can just collectively just look at these questions. In what ways might the One Planet principles help create a vision for Brisbane? What might need to happen? And what might be next steps? So maybe we can just kick off with the first question. In what ways might the One Planet principles be useful here to help create the vision to rise to the challenges and opportunities of the next 20 years? Anyone got any thoughts they'd like to share on that?
Housing seems to be a big deal on everybody's list. Housing seems to be on everyone's list as an issue, and my mom is 83 and she lives in a 4-bedroom house, and she's the only one in the house. She doesn't. So where does she go? Creating housing for seniors so that families can then live in the house that she's in. For Brisbane, I know that we have this prohibition about housing on the Baylands, but I think that given the transportation opportunities out there, I like what One Planet did with the no private vehicles in one of your, I think it was the One Brighton development. I think that's a fantastic idea. I work in Mission Bay, which has been built on an old rail yard itself, and I work with people who don't own cars anymore. One of my colleagues just got rid of his car last year, and he lives in Redwood City, takes a train and takes a shuttle home or walks home. Another colleague sold his car as soon as we moved up to Mission Bay. He lives in an apartment in San Francisco, and he walks and bikes and takes transportation, I think that could work really well on the Baylands, given the 2 rail lines there. To me, it's a huge opportunity, and I
You'd
think
like to see-
one planet and illustrating the impact that has on carbon output and all the benefits of housing. I mean, the mental and physical benefits you illustrated in your presentation were all centered around residential use. I think it would be a very attractive use for part of the Baylands. I don't think there's any reason to build on an old garbage dump. I think that would be a horrible mistake. But I think that the housing, transportation issues, water use, even in one of your developments, the water use was half of what it is for other people. That's what I see One Planet can bring to this discussion to Brisbane. But I think it's there's a little bit of education that needs to be done for people to accept it. That's all.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Given that housing is not permitted on the Baylands and that it has some toxic issues, I thought that HP site and what you did with the commercial kind of in the center on the questionable land and solar and things like that, and then putting housing around the surrounding area. I personally, when you spoke about that, I felt that that's going to be really relevant to our situation, and we're going to have to look at models like that in order to meet our goals, because some things are just off the table sometimes. And you have to do the best you can, and you have to look at those challenges as opportunities, as Lori said, that sometimes the design or the parameters are what really spark the innovation and cause you to come to the next level and make the solution that's going to not only make you rise above those restrictions, but spark the next level of innovation.
Brilliant. Anyone else? Any thoughts?
I can add something. I mean, I think this is important to look at for all different types of developments that we might have. Like, I don't just look at One Planet principles and just with just the lens of the Baylands. I mean, I think that this is something that we need to be considering for every type of development that we do going forward, because we only have one planet, right? So, I think about this for Parkside, or just even in what the city might do, like with city property and things like that. This is something that we need to look at, or even for how we operate City Hall. And we talk a lot about how we can reduce our energy consumption here, and how we have addressed the drought, and how we water and plant, just in what's under the specific like city council's jurisdiction and the decisions that we make as a body. So I think that when all like One Planet principles can factor into so many different types of decisions and scenarios, that it's important to use that to look at a lot of different things, not just one particular issue. So that's what I think that this can bring to the table, is just helping us think a little bit differently, or dive in a little bit deeper to all of the decisions that we'll need to make in multiple different areas of the city.
Yeah, you know what, I totally agree with you, Madison. I mean, that was awesome. I mean, we do a lot of things.
Yeah.
But we don't have that structure.
I think the people in the back will feel better.
Okay. So we do a lot of green, sustainable practices in our town, and I think as a community, we're about that, and we take pride in that. Having a structure like a One Planet Living framework, I think, then enables you in your zoning, in the way that you spend money in your budget. It can be tailored to staying within that One Planet Living 10 principles. I totally agree with Madison about trying to get the city to be a one planet city. Yes, the Baylands, though, has a lot of opportunities to, I think, be a shining example of what sustainability can be. And, I think, you've read our framework.
Yeah.
I mean, it does lay out a lot of really bold goals and aspirations. We've talked about transportation. Here we have this old rail yard, or this it's called a station, but really it's a stop.
Yep.
But you could create a multimodal station, and there isn't a multimodal station really anywhere in this area,
Yeah.
or west of the Mississippi River. I mean, it's just where you could have the multimodal station be the hub
Yep.
of the development, and then have a quarter mile to half mile radius of a variety of uses. Some of the uses that we've talked about tonight. You look at high speed rail potentially, but really, it's Caltrain. The electrified Caltrain line, and 3rd Street light rail, and multiple bus opportunities, and free shuttle, and bicycle sharing.
Yep.
Of course, I think that the hard part for our community right now is the housing and dealing with the contamination that's at the site. And you showcased Bed's Ed, and that's where you live. And I wanted you just to kind of maybe share a little bit more about the Bed's Ed property, because that was a former brownfield.
Yeah, that was, yeah. So it was a former brownfield site. It was former sewage spreading, but from Victorian times. So from those periods, there were quite there were some contaminants in the soil. So so what we did on that is areas we had to cap, and then areas we brought in new soil on top. So for gardens and things like that. So that worked in our particular area. But of course, every area is different with different contaminants, so it needs to be on a case-by-case basis. But ours was a brownfield site, contaminated site that we built on. But we did bring a lot of new soil in, and after capping certain areas for gardens and things like that. So.
And you said you lived there for 15 years.
Yeah.
And you have 2 children.
Well, actually, my wife has three kids from her first family.
Okay.
But yeah, they spend a lot of their teenage years in growing up on in that community. So
what made you feel safe? I mean, what provided that confidence for you? Because that's a struggle that we're dealing with. To make sure that we can ensure that if we're going to have housing there, that it is safe and that people won't be harmed.
I think there were the engineering reports, and so there were clear reports on saying how we should deal with that. So it wasn't considered, I think, an issue by most residents, and actually, different cultures, different communities have different sensitivities. So people are more conscious of the impacts now even than 15 years ago. But
in the Bay Area, you have a great example with Emeryville, where Emeryville was severely toxified. It was a naval dump facility, and a group of California citizens led by C. Renwick Breck created a California state thing, and they basically remediated the entire place about 20 years ago. So it's a precedent that you have that a place that's very bad can be remediated to be safe, and it's now it's now a little Silicon Valley over in the East Bay, and has been for decades. So I think you have some that and other stories of things that are as bad or worse probably than what you have, maybe even than you have here.
Yeah. Fran, you talk about the neighborliness.
Yes,
You
yeah.
know, the eco village type of living arrangement. You know, to me that is something that is lacking in the Bay Area. Some of those units are small, I'm suspecting, but they also have, even though there's this getting together, but there's also opportunities to have a little garden.
Yeah.
And some private space too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it isn't just, you know, stacking people on top of each other. It's providing community, but then also your own space as well.
And you know, it's a lot about using space very efficiently, rooftop gardens, things like that. You know, so that people can get their private outdoor space as well as having more communal space. But also, you know, even at BedZ, we reduced. It was the first project in the UK which actually broke planning requirements in terms of providing less parking than was required, and that set a precedent for the UK on that. But you know, actually having fewer car parking spaces freed up actually a lot of land as well. You know, clever design, and now there's so many good architects who can design very efficient spaces which also give people outdoor space that they require. And, you know, a mix of units from small units, so studio units, small, you know, up to townhouses, 4-bedroom houses, you know, with their own backyards. But also having that communal space as well, particularly where kids could get to the play space without having to cross a road. That was one of the big things which really helped kids then play with each other, and then you know, because you know your neighbours as well, you know, you're not worried about your kids when they're going out. You know someone's looking after them, or you know your neighbours. So I think all of those things act together to enable this sense of community and sense of security. And certainly in the UK, we're finding still in most places that there's still an increasing fear of crime. But in fact, when you look at crime rates, they are actually falling.
Yes.
And the correlation is, the closest correlate to that is actually breakdown in neighbourliness. So if you don't know your neighbours, you're a bit fearful of them. You know, but when you meet most people, you know, 99 out of 100 people are fine. You know? And if you know someone's not fine, you know who they are, how to manage them, and they're, you know, they're much easier it's much easier to deal with those situations. So, I think, you know, for me, it's very much about creating neighbourliness now for our in our cities and creating those support networks. You know, if we got a neighbour who's elderly and needs shopping done, you know, there are 15 neighbours who will help. You know, and it's shared out by the neighbours. If someone's got a kid and, you know, they got to take them somewhere, you know, up it goes on the Facebook page, and someone else will offer to give them a lift, you know, for example. So all sorts of things like that. So I think through good design, you can address all those issues. So
yeah, what about the whole notion about being or about living in a one planet community? I mean, is that a draw? I mean, are there people that want to be in that type of setting? And
I think, you know, it wasn't, so our developments, they don't always, you know, the developers we work with don't always sell One Planet Living as the top message, because actually they're just good places to live. When people go and see them, they just, you know, how are we going to live in the 21st century? Of course we're going to live in energy efficient homes. Of course, you know, they're going to be supplied by clean energy. You know, of course I'm going to have the convenience of a car sharing scheme. So it's really just, I guess there's a certain inevitability around this, and when people see it, and you know, I think they really do take to it. So in the UK, we've done 3 developments ourselves, and in every case, the municipality has adopted the One Planet principles.
What about the people living there themselves? I mean, do they take pride in it? I mean, knowing that, that they're trying to reduce their carbon footprint, or
so very approximately. very
sustainable,
approximately a third
principles.
of our residents come in with a green mindset. A third like it, but it's not not the major decision factor for them. And the third don't care, but they just go along with it, because it doesn't cause them a problem. So it's approximately a third between very positive to those thinking, yeah, it's nice, but not a major decision-making factor to a third who are not not bothered by it. So I think the opportunity is to get all the upside of the green without putting people off who don't self-identify or it's not the biggest issue for them. But there's always something, people are always interested in one of the 10 principles, so they always find something that they can attach to. I'm conscious of time, and I just want very, in 5 minutes or so, just think about, are there things you can do and you want to do around One Planet Living, and what might next steps be? So, just maybe we can just have a few thoughts on that, and then I think we should. You all need to get back home. I need to get back as well. So, if anyone would like to share any thoughts on that.
What I hope that we do in the council hearings is that we take the framework and that we incorporate it into the different elements of the EIR that we're studying. Yeah. So next up is transportation. And I would hope that in those hearings that we take that bigger picture and use what we have in the framework and apply it to how do we create that that vision, and then plan for it, and get all the stakeholders to buy into it.
Well, that's good. Anyone else like to?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to my original question and say that what One Planet could do is analyze the proposed Baylands development with and without housing and determine the impact on One World Planet's principles and on how many planets the development without housing would represent, and with housing, how many fewer planets that would represent as far as a footprint.
Yeah.
I had a comment kind of generally. It really strikes me that the city of Brisbane is truly a one-planet town already in the character and the people that live here and what they aspire to and their goals. And that as you go forward, just kind of keeping that in mind, how can you create the land use? And as Puran said earlier, the design makes all the difference. So, maybe you don't need every single house to have its own private backyard, like Barbara mentioned as part of the character. Maybe there's a different way to do it and still have the sense of community that is at Brisbane's heart. So just thinking about design and land use as you go forward, because I think you've got it here. The character of this town, you don't really even need to adopt the framework. It is your town. Every one of these principles seems like it's such a big part of this community already.
Yeah, and I think it's not necessarily either or. Maybe there's some houses with yards and some without. So I think we can have. There's possibility for mix, but that can all be explored and designed in, and maybe you look at areas which are less contaminated, more contaminated, and put the appropriate uses, around that. I would just like to share one hope I've got in the next 20 years is where actually cities and municipalities start taking a much more active role in terms of determining development. And I think I just want to leave you with just a couple of thoughts around, the levers you have. Now I think one of the big levers we're going to see, it's just starting to happen in a few places around the world, is where the infrastructure for new development is very expensive for private developers to put in. It's usually a big hurdle for them. But the opportunity is with municipal bonds is if the city can put in the infrastructure that you want, it becomes much easier then for any, say, new development to developer to come in and just finance the building of the individual lots, say, or lots on that. So I can see over the next 20 years cities actually determining much more proactively the sort of development they want and having a win-win situation with the developer where financing through, say, municipal bonds is approximately half that required by private developers for more speculative development. So I think there are opportunities where cities can take more control and say, this is the sort of development we want. Look, we can help you as well by offering this. And look at how that sort of development can enhance the existing community and respond to the existing community's needs. So I would like to see the public sector actually starting to use in a very clever and way and with citizens start to engage much more proactively to meet their own needs as well as the needs of coming through from developers or new users, new residents. So I would love to see that that opportunity starting to be taken. But you've got, I don't think I've come across a community which is so happy with what it's done. You've got very high levels of reported satisfaction, as you say, in the top, in the top centile of reported stuff. And I think it's fantastic the community you've got and the engagement and what you're doing. And we need more places like this to really show the way forward for the future. And so it's been, thank you very much for sharing your evening here. And it's been great for me. But I think we probably should draw it to an end. But maybe if anyone's got any very final comments, then I'll just hand over to Laurie to close up. Anyone like to say something just to finish off? Or?
I wanted to hold this to the end because it's a loopy question that you're probably not going to be able to answer. But oftentimes we see with LEED, there can be a big discrepancy at times between actual building performance and projected performance due to behavioral factors, and that's always kind of a sticking point in terms of design. So I was just wondering if you had any wisdom along in that area that you wanted to share with us.
It's a very good question, and I think what's emerging now is, and certainly with the new platform that we're creating, we're putting in very simple monitoring systems, so you can see what was set out at the beginning and how, say, the buildings or other aspects like transport is really performing. So you can get that feedback, and you can easily feed it back to people. Because there are huge opportunities, of course, for behaviour change to reflect that. Also, I think some of the, the modelling is starting to change, where they're taking into account actually, that if you have different demographics in buildings, actually you get different energy performance. So that I think predictions will get better over the next few years. So there are all sorts of initiatives on that. But you are right, at the moment there can be a big discrepancy, and I think being able to feed back real monitoring data back to people can really help make sure that that's addressed or it's identified and things put in place to get the performance back up. But it's a good question.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Barbara said. So I know that's something that you're working on, is trying to come up with some kind of metric, some kind of standards to ensure that the sustainability goals that you have set forth actually get implemented, and that they're carried on over a long period, the
or
entire
even
length
improved
of,
over time.
Right, absolutely, having those constant, those those performance
Yeah.
standards to be able
Yeah,
to
yeah.
upgrade.
Yeah.
So is that something that you're still developing and something
Yeah.
that potentially we could use in the future?
Yeah, so and on another occasion, I can talk you through how the monitoring system works, how people, you can choose your own targets and indicators, but we're also starting to work with mapping companies on open source data around what's available or on things like renewable energy and look at those as benchmarks. So you can put in the zip code, and you can compare with similar areas or areas, surrounding areas, and start benchmarking against those and looking at performance, identifying why some areas are doing better than others, and look at collaborative learning on that through giving people data, access to data, but in a very simple way that they can visualize or use. I think we're going to see over the next 2, 3, 4 years just incredible advances in that, and particularly actually coming out of Californian companies in terms of course, tech and data, data analytics, which this part of the world really is leading on.
Thank you.
So, Porin, I did have one other question. You mentioned earlier, I think that you have this new platform for getting people to participate through, like social media to put in information about what they want to see in a One Planet development. Can you talk about that and how we might be able to use that here in Brisbane?
Yeah, so our basic action planning and monitoring tools, which will go through a similar process today of thinking about what you're doing, how you feel about what you're doing, what the trends and opportunities are, but just enabling that to be documented with then the ability to take that information and start creating a One Planet action plan and populate a monitoring process for that. So that will be launched on the 1st of May. We can maybe a bit before the launch, if you're interested, talk through that. But after that, you'll be able to use it, and also to be able to start publishing, an action plan or action plans, and getting citizen comment on it. So they can comment on it, so you can then incorporate those comments into evolving the action plan, and then having that as a working document. So changing it when you need to change it, and getting new comment, new input over time. So it's a living, working document. And as other cities or developers start using it, you'll have more. Over a period of 2-3 years, you'll start to have benchmarks, ideas being shared between projects. That's our aim over the next 2-3 years for that to happen.
Okay. Well, we're looking forward to being able to use that tool, because
Okay.
our community, there's only a handful of people here tonight, but I think, there's a lot more people that are interested in Brisbane and sharing their ideas. And we've done some, online polls, and, there was actually, there was the survey that was done for the Baylands, but I think that, looking at it from a sustainability mindset would be very helpful to the citizens here. So unless there's any further questions, wanted to thank Porin for coming here tonight and sharing with us his ideas, and look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. So thanks.